Okay. I think we're ready to get started now. Hopefully, you all tuning in can hear me. Um, and for those of you who can't catch it live right now, this video will be recorded for playback later. All right, let's get started. Thank you all who are tuning in to our first official open office hours session. This is new for us, and the inspiration behind it is just to be a little more accessible for the users out there who want to ask questions about Clo. So we're here to address as many as we can, and thank you all um, who sent questions via social media. I have collected those, and I will start our session addressing them, and we'll see what it leads to. This open office hour session is intended to be very laid back. I'll depending on what questions I receive, I'll address those and demonstrate that, or I'll just branch off and work on something that may inspire other questions, or um, just be an exposure for people who are completely new in 3D as well. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So we got a question asking, when was the company founded? It started in 2009, so we are approaching our 10-year anniversary by next year, which is exciting. What was your initial idea when you made this apps? And I just wrote it how we received it, basically. Again, my name is Tambo. I'm the designer hosting our current session right now. I did not design the software, so I'm speaking on behalf of our founders, I suppose. It was one of our founders' master's thesis projects where he developed draping technology to optimize the fashion production and minimize sample yardage waste and those sorts of things. How can I learn to work with Clo? So there's many ways. There are tutorials on our YouTube channel, and there are plenty of resources online in our official website, so I can navigate that. Oh, my window's over here. Okay. So if you go on the official website, in the lessons section, I highly recommend you guys navigate to resources. And in resources, we have what's called our creators field guide. This is a great source of information. I just downloaded it. So it's basically this PDF manual, and it basically goes through all the tools, functions, what they do, best practices, tips. When I started learning the program, this is what I reference, so I find it very beneficial, and we update this pretty much almost every release. So the current one out is updated to 4.1. So definitely check this out, as well as our quick start lessons. And we have a great webinar we did about all the new 4.1 features. So I would definitely give that, a view. How many hours do I need to learn Clo completely? So we get asked that quite a bit, and the answer we typically give is it will take about 3 months of regular use to be proficient, like a super user in the program. By using our resources, using it every day, and also I forgot to mention the forums as well is incredibly beneficial. I learned things from users on there. A lot of designers from Clo are active. So we are definitely listening and sharing as many tips and tricks as we can think of. So this is quite a useful asset for you if you get stuck, or just voice it in the forum, and we typically answer fast. Okay, best way to improve. Most videos on the website are so short, and there isn't much on YouTube. So we understand people saying that the videos are too short, and we're definitely trying to make more videos, as well as like narrated ones. So if I go to our channel here, so the ones on the front page, like this one, the Guide to Fabrics and Physical Properties, this is one of our newest videos. It's completely narrated by another one of our designers. I highly recommend you check out and look for these videos in the near future. Other than that, we have been posting regularly other shorter tutorial videos of specific details you like to express, and these are mostly addressing questions for the forum. So yeah, cross-reference both resources for sure. Okay, what software should be used in addition with Clo for giving photorealistic effect, or is Clo just enough? I think Clo has an excellent internal renderer. It really just depends on the product or what you're trying to achieve. The only thing I could think of on the top of my head that the Clo render does not have is the ability to customize your lighting settings. So our light settings are quite basic. It's light intensity, there's angle, contrast, but you can't position your own custom lighting and creating atmospheres or having a background image. I mean, you could change the color of the background, but you can't have like a photograph or something. However, whatever render software you choose, you can definitely import those lighting settings, the HDRI files, into Clo and use them that way. But you cannot create custom lighting. However, as far as just like photorealistic garments, I think you could get pretty good results using Clo. And I've rendered things completely just in Clo exclusively. I could, there's a great website I recommend called HDRI Haven, and this also has free HDRI files that you can use and incorporate. So, for instance, if you build a garment and you upload this like sunrise atmosphere, your garment is going to look like it's photographed outdoors, which is kind of cool. So highly recommend you mess around with that. And you do that by downloading that file and selecting environment map and just selecting a preset there. Where do you suggest to start if someone is thinking on getting into the 3D world? I would recommend starting with Clo. That's from my experience. I'm a fashion designer, and Clo was the first 3D software that I was exposed to. And you'll find once you learn Clo and kind of familiarize yourself with the different settings and tool names and stuff, a lot of them do cross over with other 3D programs, like the certain lingo that's used. So you tend to like naturally pick up other 3D software as well. But Clo, I think, is very intuitive and user friendly, and that's how I jumped into the 3D world. How accurate are the patterns that you create in Clo? Um, I mean, you can make production ready garments and patterns. It just depends on your experience. You have the tools, you have grading features, you have the ability to add seam allowances, but you have to have some sort of pattern background. I mean, you can use Clo as loose as you want to just kind of like initially prototype or realize a design you have in your head and then clean up the patterns, or depending on what workflow you're using, using pre-existing patterns and just assembling them in Clo. But yeah, we pride ourselves that it is very much true to life and accurate. How are fabric physics integrated in Clo? So aside from our in our library, the fabrics we provide, we have different fabrics with information if you hover over it, weight, thickness, and also these properties um, are disclosed within details in these slider windows. So these all control the physical properties. And again, shout out to that video I was telling you about earlier, Guide to Physical Properties. It does go into depth of what all these things do. But in addition to that, we sell a fabric kit um, exclusively to our enterprise clients where they can test uh, their proprietary fabrics and get an accurate representation. And that would be through uh, this emulator mode where it kind of guides you how to use the equipment and get an accurate measurement. We also have a tutorial online for that on YouTube as well. So I highly recommend you check that as well. Uh, okay, can you add motion for the kids' avatar? So to my understanding, it's we don't have any intention to create motion avatars offered in the program for kids avatars. However, as an alternative, you could utilize Mixamo, which it's free. It's a free animation slash rigging, like I want to call it software, but it's just on the website. It comes with the Adobe Suite if you're already subscribed to that. And what you do essentially is uh, open up the avatar in Clo, save it as an OBJ file, and then bring it into Mixamo, and it will rig it for you, and then give you options of what specific animation you want to do. I suppose I could demonstrate that. We still have time. Okay, I'm just gonna have a sec to boot this up again. Okay, so if you were to, and this applies for any avatar really. So I have my children's avatar, and then I could go to File, Export OBJ, kid avatar. Okay, select all avatars. It's a single object, so the default settings seem okay. All right. And what you're going to get is a compressed folder. Just extract it to open it up, and then you get another folder here. And once you open that, you have your kid avatar OBJ. So if I go to Mixamo, okay, so you would upload a character first, which I'm going to do the kid's avatar. Okay, so this is the auto rigger. So basically recognize our OBJ avatar, and then it's asking you like really simple placements, like where the chin is. So I'm just gonna do that. Wrists, elbows, and this is basically like dictating where like the points of articulation would be. Okay. And it's gonna process to rig it. Okay, sometimes it takes a little while. Maybe I can jump to another question while that finishes. Okay, this one I didn't understand how to like make something that feels like wire. So I don't really understand that question, but if I were to try to interpret wire, I would just make a little sphere shape, change the particle distance so it's not as geometric, and basically increase would it be increasing the thickness? And then that becomes like a giant ball, but if you do curve side geometry off, you kind of get this shape. And that possibly, or, oh, okay. So another way to go about it. So I'm gonna make a really thin, like long rectangle. Change that to 5. Then if I change this thickness, oops. Yeah, that looks a bit more. And then this thing will actually drape, so that looks a little more like a wire. And the simulation is quite dramatic just because this piece is so light. It's doing weird things right now. Okay, so back to this avatar, you see there's a preview of how the child is rigged. You click next. I'll click next. It's not letting me go past this window. Okay, okay, there it goes. Okay, so you get a preview of the avatar in that window, and all I have to do, I think, is just double click on what I want it to do. And then, yeah, you see a preview of your avatar. So you can, once you decide what you like, you download, and you can download the FBX file, which is an animation file, and bring this into Clo. Or you could use it for different poses, and save it as a pose file for your avatar, so you have that kind of library. But yeah, that's how you'd go about like rigging an avatar. Okay, how to apply ladder stitch? Wasn't sure about that one because ladder stitch is basically an invisible. I'll just pull this up for the people who aren't familiar. So yeah, it's basically like a stitch around the edges that yeah, like closes it, but you can't you can't see the stitch, so I'm not sure. I mean, if you just sew two shapes in clo, you're not going to see the stitching necessarily. So I'm not sure exactly what detail of a ladder stitch you're trying to achieve. So, I mean, this could be a ladder stitch for all I know. You can't really see the sewing. Unless, I don't know if maybe while you apply that, there is some tension between the seams. So in that case, I would recommend perhaps messing with your elastic, so, which will gather that slightly. If I make this a lower particle distance, you'll see the um, yeah, I mean, something like that. That's my best guess. And of course, you can always use our puckering tool if you aren't familiar with that, which lives all the way over here. So you may have to expand your window, and you just like click on a segment, and you can see that detail applied. So it's slightly gathered, and this just lives in your object browser, and you could change the intensity, the density of it, and also the width, which is basically like how tall it is. So if I make that like 1, you could see how that is expressed. Okay, how to design a poofy sleeve and a down jacket. Okay. Go ahead and bring in my avatar. And a garment file to work off of. Okay, so I think I know what you're asking, but I'm gonna show two things. Okay, so if you want a sleeve to be poofier or have more volume, a handy way to do that is using our slash and spread tool. Sorry, I'm just reading some questions coming in. So if you wanted to give this more volume, you select one point and then the other side you wish to expand, and then it kind of looks like this. And if I right click, I could specify how much I want the distance to move. So I'll just do 2, for example. And then making sure the arrow is up, so I know this is the area I'm expanding as opposed to the bottom. So I'll go ahead and right click again. So by doing that, typically you tend to like poof up the sleeve and give it more volume. So so that's kind of one way. But as far as down jackets and that sort of thing, that's basically applying pressure, which I will show you. And apologize if you guys are hearing that siren. It's New York City. Okay, so like let's say this is the jacket, for instance. How you apply pressure is layer clone under, which all you have to do is use your transform pattern tool, select all your patterns, right click, and then there's layer clone under. So what this does is duplicate your patterns but place them underneath. So if I do that in my 3D window, let me just make this a different color. Maybe that'd be easier to show. So for instance, I've made that second layer a different color, and if I remove a pattern, you could see there's a duplicate one right underneath. And how it works is we'll apply pressure to the top piece, which will push air out to the left, for instance, in my screen. And then this one, we would apply negative pressure, which would ultimately push it back towards the avatar, which will give it that inflated effect. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so pressure lives right here under simulation properties. 40 is pretty decent, but you guys can experiment with that. I think it goes up to 70. And then the bottom, I will do negative pressure. And the reason why it's negative is because the pressure, when it's positive pressure, it applies towards the direction of the face of the fabric. So for instance, this is our face, but our underneath pattern, the face is going the same direction. So if we did both positive, it would just like, they would both be pushing out and it really wouldn't look that good. So that's why on the bottom we apply negative pressure. Yeah, so once I do that, I could simulate, and then yeah, this thing will inflate quite a bit. And that's just using 40. One step further than this, if you wanted a quilted effect, which is really neat. So in order to make like a quilted jacket for an, oh, see, so what happened is I kept the pressure on one layer and then left out the other, so this thing's trying to fly away. Back to 0. Okay, so all you have to do is offset internal lines. So I'm just going to select the bottom of one sleeve, our front bodice, and then the back, offset internal line, and I'll do 2. And just enough for it to fill the, oops, the pattern piece here. Okay, so when we have our internal lines as so, now if I layer clone under and apply pressure, it has a really nice effect, and those internal lines are actually sewn together. So if I lift this, you could see what's going on inside. So that's really cool, and you're going to get better effects, you know, depending on how realistic you want to go. Always a good rule of thumb is maybe you know, seeing how it looks like in particle distance 5. I mean, 5 is more of a finishing quality that you would use for a garment, but in my typical workflow, I'll keep changing it back and forth to make sure it, you know, has the look I'm trying to achieve. And then, you know, once I'm finishing up the project, I'll apply everything back to 5. Yeah, you get a little more detail and dimension, and this would also be a good opportunity to, again, to utilize that puckering tool for this sort of garment. I could just do that, you know, so something like that, but definitely play around with it. Select both sides for it to appear on both. Probably want to tone down the width, so you know, something like that for a down jacket. Okay. Okay, how to design little things like gloves. Yeah, so you can absolutely design gloves. There currently isn't like an automated way of doing it. I find gloves to be a little more advanced just because you have to be comfortable, you know, manipulating and navigating through the 3D space and manipulating the fabric and patterns. But let me just look if there are any other questions I can ask, and then I could just jump into uh, perhaps just drafting, how I would go about drafting a glove. Just give me a sec. Okay, we have a question that reads, can you review fabric pattern manipulation, as in the diagonals and sizing of print layout mode? Okay. Let me just garment on her. Okay. Let me find the print. Maybe camo. Okay. So let's say this is our pattern. So if you go up here to your edit texture tool, you can manipulate your prints through here. So if I just click on a piece, I can start moving the placement. Um, yeah, of my print. This line right here that appears is your grain line. So if you wanted it to drape as a bias, I would um, tilt it. And I'm also holding shift, and that's going to lock to my 45-degree angle. And if I keep holding it, it will lock, back to the 90. So that's how you change, manipulate drape. As far as the actual print itself, this this little tool up here will scale it. So if I, click and then pull it out or down, you're going to scale your print. This one here will widen it, and then this will lengthen it. And then up here is your rotation. So notice if I rotate it, the whole thing is changing, and that's because every pattern piece is applied to the same fabric. But I get asked this quite a bit in trainings. For instance, like someone will want to, make this one diagonal, this side diagonal, and this side diagonal. So what you need to do is copy the fabric, right? So just remember, like, I'm going to say left side has this fabric applied, and then right side has this fabric applied. So when I change this one, right, it only applies to that left, and then this one, same, or it's more like that. So that's how you can control individual pieces. This So you can do that all just, in your workspace utilizing the edit texture tool, but you can also access this through your print layout mode. So locate simulation up here, and then print layout. And you also get this 2D view of your flat patterns to get an initial yardage yield. So depending on where I place these in space, it's going to calculate that percentage. So if I move this piece here, it's going to grow. You can also reset to default arrangement. So Clo is going to interpret like what is the best usage of your fabric, but this is not necessarily realistic because I didn't apply my seam allowances. But if you do have seam allowances, it will consider those. And also, again, you have your edit texture tool pop up here. So you can, if it's easier for you to see, if this is like an engineered print or something, you could just physically place the patterns in the 2D window if that's a better workflow for you. And notice that the fabric roll I'm working with only has this pattern because I only applied this newly copied fabric to this pattern piece. But if I go back to the original, all the other pieces will live there. So yeah, depending on how many fabrics or prints you have, it will come up and populate as tabs up here. It will not do that for fabric that does not have a print texture. Let me just check if there's any more. Yeah. Yeah, if there's any other questions, by all means, shoot them this way. If not, I'll try to tackle that glove. Yeah, creating a glove from scratch. I'm just assuming you would, go into it without a pattern, so that's how I'm gonna approach it. But yeah, if we get any more questions, I'll deviate and address those. But for now, I'll just try to tackle a glove here. Um, if you guys don't know already, a handy tip is to use F. So if I know I'm going to be working on this hand here, rather than just like trying to navigate the 3D space, I could select F, and then that hand will be my point of rotation, which is really a convenient way to work. So yeah, for this glove, I've tried a few things before, and I've seemed to get to the same place for different ways. But I was using this line avatar tool. So for those who aren't familiar, you could literally just draw on an avatar and extract a pattern piece from it. So if I were creating like a front bodice quite quickly, just make sure it's a closed shape, and then you'd go to this flatten tool here, and then it's going to highlight blue, so that's a good thing. It means it recognizes it as a solid shape. Click, and then it will tell you select all areas to be flattened, then press enter. So when I press enter, a pattern piece kind of like morphs in our 2D window, and obviously you would have to clean this up. But the point of the 3D line tool is just to quickly visualize styles. And then from here, I know like I'd want my center front to be straight. For those of you who are wondering how you like align your patterns, if I want this perfectly straight, because we could tell it's at a tilt, using your transform pattern tool, select it, and then rotate. Select y-axis, and when I hover over that line, you're going to see it straighten with the y-axis. So that's a way how you could like, arrange your workflow a little better, and then from here, tweak it as you please. So this is basically the method I'm going to use to create gloves. So I tried at one point to just draw the whole. I mean, by no means am I like a professional glove maker. However, if you just break it up into smaller pieces, you can interpret it quite well. So I'm gonna start like somewhere here. I'm gonna go along the thumb, and you can actually see the texture image of the avatar. Oh, okay, so you see what happened there? I wasn't locked on to the hand, so I'm just going to click F again and then have that be my point of rotation. So I'm just gonna keep clicking. What I was saying, so you can actually see the seam of the avatar image, so that actually conveniently makes like a good reference point. So I'm just going to follow that. Something weird happened there. If you mess up, you could just push backspace, and you could still retain. Okay. So I'm just gonna do this whole top portion because I wanna demonstrate what challenges you might occur when approaching it this way. And this is definitely like a simplified version of a glove. Like it needs gussets between the fingers, which we will create, but just for demonstration purposes, if I try to select this, typically if your pattern or like outline that you wish to extract is around more curvature and like more complex angles, it may not flatten it for you. So if I try to press enter here, let's see if it does it for me. Okay, so failed to cut some patterns. So at this point, I would break up the shapes to smaller ones. So if I were to tackle this thumb piece, and then make sure it's touching a line. So if I try to do that and press enter, right, so that works out for me. So I could now go around and start breaking it up into like, the finger patterns and then connect it to my main one. This is still in our army color. And also don't forget to change particle distance as well, working with smaller shapes, because you end up getting these like super geometric patterns, and they're prone to going through the avatar as the mesh is quite large. So you want to work in a smaller particle distance for gloves, and you could work with all the pieces at particle distance 5 because it's such a small surface area. Okay. Someone's asking about a piping tool, and maybe that'd be a good opportunity to demonstrate when I'm a little further along the glove. So just hang tight, whoever you are. I'll try to be mindful of our time. Okay. All right, so for this, I would make a gusset. And I'm just gonna end them on like the center of the fingertips. So, and then I'll break up this pointer finger here. So let's see if that works. Okay, that's working as well. And this army print keeps coming back. Right, so let me go ahead and draw all this stuff. And again, this whole process is assuming that you have no pattern and you want to create your own gloves. But if you had if you did have a pre-existing pattern, it would ultimately just be a matter of manipulating your pieces over, like hovering them over the hand, probably using a lot of pins to like ensure everything's like in the right place, and then yeah, simulating accordingly to construct those. Okay, and then we break off the fingers here. And I will warn you, these patterns will be choppy, but it is just a starting point for me to visualize, all the pieces in the 3D space. So I got my middle finger, pointer finger, ring finger. Oh, no. Sorry, experiencing a bit of lag here. Okay, while that loads, I might as well just address that piping question. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the screen again. Glad we resolved that, and thankfully close automatic save helped us out there. So I still retain some of the glove, um, but I'm gonna move on to this piping tool just in case anything else happens. Oh, is the sound laggy? Try to talk a little slower. I'm good. Okay. Okay, so where's the piping tool? It lives up here, and how it works is if you wanted piping around this collar, for instance, I would just start my piping and then like walk it around. So maybe I could do the whole collar here. No, so what happens is at a certain point, it Clove thinks you want to wrap it around one end or the other. So in this case, I would just click and then continue my line. And then end it. And yeah, it populates some piping here, and those settings live in the property editor right here. So I could specify the width. So if I do, let's see, 2. So it'll make it smaller. Particle distance is pretty low. I mean, you could go even smaller than that, and it simulations should run optimally considering it's such a small um, piece. And then if you wanted to change the piping to a different color, I would create one here. Oops. Let's make this white. And then your edit piping tool up here. So if I click there, I'll get the properties once more. And then what fabrics you have in your object browser, you can assign to your piping. So you would have specific detail there, which is cool. Okay, I'll move back to the gloves if no one else has any questions. Select all that. Okay, so for those of you who may be newer to the program and are still getting used to navigating, I always encourage users to keep in mind about this blue dot here when you select a piece, because I just went about flattening all these pieces and then kind of realized that it's difficult for me to differentiate the 3D patterns versus the 2D. So whatever I'm selecting on, that pattern is going to highlight. So for instance, I know this finger is here, that one will move here, and then I can arrange my 2D space accordingly. So you can see how that's really important part of the workflow is just organizing yourself in both windows. Then let's flatten that. Okay, so this is like a really crude pattern and it needs a lot of cleanup, but for me, it's a starting point at least. So, and I could just start clicking and notice where I click, there's a blue dot that appears. So if I say, I want to attach this side to this side, that's expressed in the 2D window. And then start, and then I'm just going to match the lengths here. 1678. Oh, that's completely off. 78. Merge. And then, you're going to get lines like this. You're going to want to delete all curve points. And you're basically, at least how I'm going about it, I would reshape these fingers and kind of clean it up, because it's not practical working with all these different points. So yeah, it is quite tedious, but I mean, in my opinion, you do get pretty good results once I'm done with this. 9.6. These would probably be closer, so I could select all those points and pivot them over. That probably could be here. Okay. And then our last finger here. It's going to be pretty wonky, so. And I mean, if you're draping stuff like I am here, like you don't have to necessarily worry about the precise measurements yet. To visualize it, you can always go back and refine the points, making sure everything's matching up and aligning. But as you can see, I kind of have something going here. So at this point, I'm going to start dropping pins, and for those of you who don't know, you can create individual pins by just holding W and then left clicking, and then you got one placed there, as opposed to the pin box tool, where I mean, you could, like, when you select the pin box tool, there is a mesh that comes up that you could select individual vertices, but typically I'll use this for, like, you know, just marqueing over something and like locking down a whole area. But yeah, just from your selection tool, really convenient shortcut. So I'm gonna do the main points, fingertips. I'll do in here. And this is kind of boxy because it's particle distance 5, so I'll change that back. Right, so that's a little more concentrated. Okay, and then I'll hit simulation on, stuff jumps around a bit, and then I'll start just positioning. So it really is just a matter of, that's completely twisting. Yeah, just a matter of like positioning this accordingly. If you just click on a pin like I did, you'll bring up your gizmo tool if you want to be a little more accurate, or you could just drag it in space. Stuff is wiggling around. Okay, probably help this out a little. Okay, and then for the gussets, so I'm basically going to go in here and extract these pieces as well. Also wanted to point out, if I select two pieces when I flatten, and because they share this seam line, if I activate them, so I'll push enter, you're going to get these two pieces here, but they actually have sewing applied already if you do multiple pieces. So I mean, in theory, maybe I could flatten every single thing at the same time, but typically it doesn't work that way because Clo will tell me, you know, it can't recognize some sort of surface. That's why I do it kind of, you know, in fractions. But yeah, keep that in mind when utilizing the 3D line tool for a bodice. You could definitely like draw a whole top and then flatten, and then it will already be sewn for you. I'm going to quickly clean these up. And this will go here. Okay. And then let's move on to the last. Oh. So there's, okay, so looking, pattern outlines are intersecting. So yeah, if there's something wrong, it's going to tell you. And I think the problem is this whole thing here. So I mean, just for time's sake, I'm just going to duplicate these and shorten them. But if you were to go about changing these lines, you absolutely could, with your edit line tool, where you can move the points, or if you delete, you could delete these. So you could definitely edit it after they've been made. Um, okay, so that should be good enough. Okay, and then our bottom part. Oh, something went wrong there. Just redraw this. And I could just close up this part. So yeah, if you're working off the avatar, it could be awkward sometimes because the body gets in the way for these sort of details, but yep, just utilize the F tool to zoom in. Okay, start extracting these. Pointer finger. Oh, that's a huge piece. Yeah, these came out pretty wide, so I kind of have some prior knowledge of how the hand glove pattern should look like. So just gonna make those edits. And yeah, by all means, if you don't know how to create a certain garment, like, you should reference online like actual patterns, because I mean, a lot of this stuff is constructed in a very similar way. Um, so I find myself doing that, revisiting my old student pattern books or whatnot, um, if I need to express some sort of detail. And it looks like we're running a little over time, but that's all right. I just want to realize this and bring that play earlier. Oh yeah, people had questions about the avatar editor as well. Okay, let me just deviate from that. So those of you who want to know how to edit your avatar, you find avatar up here, and there's avatar editor, and so you get these sliders that change the proportions of your avatar, but it's not a matter of like just inputting measurements. You kind of have to just gauge it with the slider. However, in your 3D window, it's going to tell you the measurements or the circumference around each part. So you could go off of that. And then in your arrangement, which is basically your arrangement points, these are the default ones that come with your avatar. These blue dots that we use to snap patterns, this is what that is. So you can ultimately create your own, and this would actually be maybe useful if you were tackling something like a glove. You can set bounding volumes, which are these things here. So an avatar consists of main bounding volumes: the head, neck, torso, and then legs. And then you would assign a point to a bounding volume, and then you would move it where you'd want it to be, and that's all here. So the left side is creating a new bounding volume, and that will come in like this. You have to change the height and width for it to make sense around, whatever you're trying to wrap it against or around. And then, so if this is our tutorial, and then to create a arrangement point, you would go to your right side here. It's going to come up, and then you have to assign it to a bounding volume. So you're going to have all the things in the list, and then we're going to find ours that we just created, and that will populate one for you. And to move it, you would just use your sliders to position it accordingly. So like I was saying with the glove, you would make very tiny bounding volumes and assign arrangement points. So if you had a pre-existing pattern, in theory, you could just snap it on to the fingers as opposed to arranging it manually like I am. But I guess that's just a different workflow in general. Okay. Actually, that's pretty. Okay, so here's a situation that could be useful. So this is a terrible line and shape. So I basically want to like clean it up. But if I were just to delete all curve points, I don't really have any reference of how the prior curvature was. So what you can do in these kind of situations is select your pattern, right click, and then clone as reference line. So what that does is when I straighten out this line, you're going to see that original style line, and then I could go in and clean it up, but at least I have that reference there. This is way too wide here. Okay. At this point, I could probably start, I can attempt to sew this thing. Get that other thumb in there. So I am kind of changing things in the 2D window, and this kind of comes through prior experience working in gloves. So yeah, definitely having background does help. However, you could just reference patterns that are online or in books. Okay, let's start just sewing this stuff. Okay, setting up my arrangement. Forgot to pin this guy down. Oh no, my God. Oh, I guess it's all fell. Freeze those and position this other stuff. Okay. All right, at this point, I think I could get it to sew together. So let me go ahead and make those arrangements. on the sides. Okay. Okay, and then the last is the gussets to the bottom pieces. Wow. Okay, I'm just like soaring, making all these sewing arrangements. Get this thing together. Oh man. Okay, this got all tangled up. I ran through that way too quickly. I do want to address the pleat sewing tool. For you, somebody asked that, so I'm gonna freeze this. So if I wanted to make a back pleat, for instance, I could just make a seam here, and that's G using our internal polygon line tool. So G just creates an internal line, cut and sew that, and I could fuse this together. So I'm going to put a center back pleat. So what I could do is select my side, right click, offset pattern outline, and I'll do, I don't know, 1 inch, and then the number of offsets can be specified. So that's 2. Oh, and a feature I missed is when you do that, be sure to select create internal line because you'll need those to create pleats. So if you notice when I did it, it just came up with these blue baselines that can't be selected with your edit pattern tool, but it will create internal lines if you select that option. And then once I do that, I could find my pleats fold tool, and it doesn't really matter actually, depending on what pleat you want. So if I go from inside out, I'm going to get this window, and because the side is reflected, the knife pleat will end up expressing more of like a box pleat or inverted box pleat. So you could see the colors change, and that means these internal lines have fold angles assigned to them. So this kind of like, I don't know, like very subtle red orange has fold angle 0, whereas this one has the 360. So I've done those changes. You can kind of see something happening here. And when I simulate, it's also good to use your strengthen tool. This helps simulation. I'll simulate that. And then in this case, an internal box pleat was created and unstrengthened, and that kind of lays that way. And if I were to change my mind and swipe over the pleats tool here from outside in, same settings, knife pleats 2, that should change to an inverted box plate. And again, strengthen helps do that. So that just reversed the other way. And you'll notice here that this is not sewn together. So you want to reinforce this. So if you don't know where this is in your 2D space, click here. So that's this. And you want to sew it to this center front point. So I could just do that with my free sewing tool here. And you're going to see the sew lines in there. And do the same for the other side. And then simulate, and that should lay nicer. And if you get some weird, like, kind of polygon thing going on, that all has to do with particle distance. So don't worry, in your finished product, if you're working with 5, that will go away, as you can see there. So yeah, we're definitely running overtime, and I apologize to the person who asked about the glove pattern. It's a very crude example, but I mean, at least you were able to see the process, and it would just be a matter of like sewing all these accordingly. However, if you guys are really interested in a glove tutorial, like definitely like voice it in the forum, in the comments. Like we read pretty much everything. So speak to us and tell us what content you want. We'll be more than happy to create that stuff for you. But yeah, I'm gonna conclude our first open office hours session. I had a lot of fun doing it. Thank you all so much for your questions. We intend for this to be a regular thing. We're trying to be a little more low key with these office sessions, very casual, just a hangout. So yeah, we intend to be back very soon, and happy clowing. Thank you all.